maybe next year we're going to look into that idea on my geology. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. If you bear with me for the next 45 minutes or so, I would try and enlighten you on a topic that I found interesting a couple of years ago while walking along the coast in Chatham, well, Cedros actually. I took a walk from Fullerton Bay to Cedros Point, upon which I came across these boulders, pink, red, purple. I've heard about porcelainites. I grew up in South Trinidad, and I always saw the rocks on the roads, but it was the first time that I'm actually coming across the rocks on the beach. So about 2 years ago, it piqued my curiosity, my interest, and I went about an exercise just to learn a bit more about what these rocks are about, and hopefully I can share that with you this afternoon. The title, Sick on Sulphur, was taken from the Express headline November 1st, 2003. So I'm going to tie in a bit of the technical talk with lots of pictures, because I know there are lots of non-geologists here, relating an incident that happened a year ago actually, in Chatham, which some of you would have heard about. So I hope to mix the technical with the non-technical. All right, I'm going to keep the lights on so no falling asleep. And we're not going to be too long. All right. Porcelain rocks. Are you seeing the back? Well, I'm saying you keep seeing the slides in the back. If you're not hearing me, just give me a wave. What are we talking about? This is an outline of the presentation. Where are these rocks? What do these rocks look like? For some of you who have never seen these rocks before, how do they form? I'll give some brief insights into how these rocks, the birth of these rocks. I'm going to go in a bit into the Chatham incident. Again, it was focused in the papers just over a year ago. And even today, there are some incidents, some isolated incidents being reported here and there. This is where I came in a bit. I always read about porcelainite deposits being affiliated with lignites, but everyone was saying probably. So I sought out to see, okay, is it true? Are porcelainite deposits really affiliated with lignites? So we're going to look at some outcrop studies, Southwest Peninsula and Point Paloma. And finally, I'll give just a brief insight into the significance of these rocks and some of its uses. What are they? When we read the Trinidad geology, the Trinidad literature, we come across the term porcelainites to refer to two distinct rock types. There's one that's penetrated in some of the wells in the northern basin, and then there's porcelainites that I'll be talking about, Paleoplistocene age, altered sandstones and shales. I'm just going to touch briefly on the ones in the northern basin and get rid of it. You wouldn't hear any more about it. This is a transect in the northern basin area. This is the outline of Trinidad here. And this is a little section you're seeing here. And these are wells that were drilled. These porcelainites really comprise diagenetically altered siliceous rocks. And they're normally associated with like cherts, shales, organic limestones, and the likes. They are, relative to the porcelainites I'll be talking about today, they're very old. They're Cretaceous in age. And this is what they look like in cores. Right? I will not be saying any more about these porcelainites, but as you read Trinidad's literature, you will be coming across this term. Porcelainites that I'm interested in are these crisp, bright red, according to Kula, baked and fused clays and shales found in the roof and floor of burnt lignite seams. All right, a term introduced by Wall and Sawkins in their report on geology in 1860. That's the porcelainites that I'm interested in, easily identifiable. Aesthetically pleasing, as I would call them, very attractive rocks. Where do we find these rocks? Typically we hear in the papers reports of burning lignites. Coincidentally, these areas coincide with porcelainite outcrops. Here we see two areas, generally Erin, Buenos Aires, Chatham, Granville, Coromandel, Cedros. Some of us are from these areas. And alternatively, Sandy Grande, Sangre Chiquito, fishing pond. These are the two main areas. There are other scattered deposits that are found, I think, in Vecini, I think as far as Maruga, in Montefiore deposits. Most of these deposits are actually in what we call the Erin Formation of Paleoplistocene age. Again, where? It's in the Southwest Peninsula. Just to zoom in a bit, you're actually looking at these orange streets. The yellow is actually the Erin Formation. And we are actually looking at these orange streets. These are the porcelainite outcrops in the Southwest Peninsula. The other area, fishing pond, Kaiwal area, Sandy Grande. So we're looking at this area. I'm just going to zoom in a bit. Again, we're looking at these very faint orange streaks. By far, most of the deposits are found in the Southwest Peninsula. So that was a way. So what do these rocks look like? What do I expect to see? These rocks are very easily identified. A walk along the coast, once you come upon the porcelainite rocks, you know that you're upon the porcelainite rocks. Just a quick look at the base of the porcelainites. Here we see the very distinct contact at the base of the rock. Similarly here, oh, I apologize for the picture, it's looking a bit dark there. It's very nice on my screen. But this is the base of the porcelainites you're looking at. And these are the underlying shales. As you can see, a very distinct coloration. The shales are pretty much unaltered in this area. Similarly here, this is the porcelainite. This is the same deposit located at Chatham Cliff. This is the porcelainite here, and these are the overlying shales, and this is the contact. Again, the porcelainite rocks, red in color, discolored, burnt. The overlying shales, hardly altered. They are altered, I say hardly altered. This example from Cedar's Point actually shows the overlying shales, but what has happened is that the porcelainite, there was a bit of hydrothermal alteration. The movement of fluids caused a sort of a red coloration. Again, I apologize for the picture on the wall, but there's a bit of red coloration here. So, what are we looking at? A very distinct contact with adjacent sandstone and shales. As I said, aesthetically pleasing. It's a beautiful rock. Lots of colors, dark blue, gray, lavender, brick red, yellow. From what we can make out, here's the yellow. And on this one face, there's actually reds, yellows, there's lavenders, there's purples, and in some of the corners, there's actually blues. That's another characteristic of these rocks. Very distinctive. This particular example came from Chatham Cliff. I guess you can see why my interest peaked while walking upon these rocks. What else should we expect? A lateral variation in color. So besides seeing the colors, as you walk from one end of the outcrop to the other end, what happens is you move from shades of bright reds, bright blues, sparkling, striking colors, and as you get towards the margins of the outcrop, you get this dirty yellow. That's another characteristic feature of almost all the outcrops that I've seen. The other thing to note is that there's very good preservation of sedimentary structures. So whatever process formed these rocks, and I will get into that a bit later, whatever process formed these rocks, it was not successful in destroying a lot of the sedimentary features associated. Here, again, this example from Coin Cliff. We see these colors are actually coincide with bedding planes that existed in the rock. And similarly here at Cedar's Point, this is a beautiful thick sand bedding plane, sandstone bedding plane that easily identifiable. All right, so again, there's a preservation of bedding planes in these structures. To note, you see the laminations, you see cross beds. You walk on these outcrops, and the original sedimentary structures stand out at you. Some of the other rock characteristics, there's abundant fissures, cubical joints, there's various degrees of induration, kind of coincide with the colors. The darker colors, the more solid, bright, sparkling colors are pretty hard and indurated rocks. And as you get to the softer colors, it's very soft, weathered layers. Conchoidal fracture. Maximum thickness of approximately 80 feet. That's the maximum recorded thickness by Kugler 1959, who mapped the island in 1959. He found approximately 80 feet thickness porcelainite rocks. Is the maximum recorded thickness that I've seen. And very interesting, whatever process is forming these rocks, it's forming to a depth of 100 feet. Now I'm going to go on to talk about burning. There's a burning process that forms these rocks. And to picture that 100 feet below the earth, to me, it was a bit puzzling. This picture was actually taken at Cedar's Point. Very nice porcelainite outcrop. What is the process? The formation of porcelainite rocks. You're looking at a sintering or burning of carbonaceous lignite and clays. How does that take place? There are two schools of thoughts. One school, and the definition given by Kugler, is that you have lignite beds, which is coal, a sort of immature coal, burning at the top, burning, and what happens is that you have alteration at the top of these beds and at the roof of these beds. So you have one massive bed burning, and those beds in contact with the sandstones above and below form the porcelainite rocks. The problem with that theory is, where does the porcelainite go? And where is the evidence for the porcelainite? And how does one porcelainite bed cause the formation of 80 feet of rock? So the other theory, the other school of thought is, within the sandstone beds themselves, you have thin interbedded seams of lignite, or thin lignite beds which actually burn. Hence, you probably will get 80 feet of porcelainite. This burning is caused by, how does a fire start? I'll get into the example at Chatham, I'll get into more details. But generally, lignite beds spontaneously combust. But what do I mean by that? There's no need for human input. On one side, there's ignition by bushfires, lightning, and even man-made fires. But more than normal, what happens is you have spontaneous combustion of coals caused by oxidation. What happens is that these lignite beds absorb oxygen with the carbon and produces an exothermic reaction, which gives off heat. If the heat cannot escape, once the heat cannot escape, what will happen is that the temperatures of these lignite or these coal beds are raised so high that the beds combust. And that's how the fire starts. As I said, the reaction is exothermic. The released heat can result in the spontaneous combustion of lignite beds, dependent on specific conditions. Moisture. Believe it or not, moisture actually increases the chances of these beds spontaneously combusting. Fine grain, if your lignite beds are very fine grain, that also increases the chances. Airflow, obviously we expect some amount of oxygen, but airflow works in two ways. Airflow can either remove the heat, dissipate the heat, or airflow can provide the oxygen needed. So that's how the fire starts. Once the fire begins, as we saw in Chatham, it continues to burn and to burn and to burn and to burn. We'll see how long. We get some ideas on how long this burn continues. All right, so stick on sulphur. That's the title of my presentation. I would now take you through a chronology of events that took place last year, according to the slide beginning in June, where we had a report from the EMA of continuous rising smoke with smelly odor. That's how I got it. Now here's a map of the Southwest Peninsula. This is where the site is located. This is Chatham. If you go further, Chatham, for those who live above Grand Bazaar. Here is Cedros Point. This is Cedros Point, sorry, and the Cedros Granville area. All right. This is the site. This is what it looked like when we first visited it in July the 27th last year. A visit by the EMA and the Ministry of Energy. I know that some of us, Curtis, I think some of us from the GST also visited the site around that time. As you can see, vegetation gone. There's a faint plume of smoke. Didn't seem to warrant any emergency at the time. I can tell you the pungent odor, it did have pungent odor at the time, enough. You could probably stay at the site for an hour, and after that you need to get out. The vegetation is affected. This is another view from the site. That previous picture was taken just at this point. This is another site. This is the lignite bed that's in question. It's a lignite bed approximately 7 feet thick, just a little bit taller than I am. It's dipping, very gentle dip, 3 degrees to the east. And if we walk along the bed in this direction, out of the plane of the page, coming along in this direction, it continues for a minimum bed thickness of 170 feet. This is the bed that's fueling that fire. All right, and this is what it's comprised of. It's comprised very rich in carbonaceous wood fragments. A major source is coal. Basically, we are burning coal, immature coal. All right, these pictures were actually taken from that bed. We visited the site again in October 2003, and again the vegetation, the fire has actually spread. What we are seeing here is the lignite bed burning, and the overlying muds actually collapsing onto the bed. So this lignite bed that's burning is creating a space, and that space has to be filled. And that is one of the problems with some of the outcrops we're seeing. If you're burning this massive set of rock, where is that space that was left after the burn? It's one of the problems with the outcrops, and probably an area for further work. I'll get back into that a bit later. All right, here's a colleague of mine for scale, but actually the fire again is burning in the direction of my colleague here. I think the earlier picture I took was actually in this area. I'm going to zoom in on this point right here. And that's what it looks like. It looks like molten lava. Actually, the heat here is so intense. I think we were fortunate to get this picture. I think it's a snap and run kind of thing. All right. I'll discuss briefly some of the temperatures we're dealing with a bit later. Again, in October, we begin to see the formative stages of porcelainite rocks. Looking at the sort of pinkish, reddish coloration, the oxidation taking place. Oh yes, you can actually see it on the slide. You're seeing some yellowish greening stains. Thank you. It's a motion sensor. That's actually sulphur that we're looking at. Precipitating from the burn, from the lignite bed. The lignite bed was here, it's now burnt, and it's gone. This is a close-up of those same rocks. Again, we're seeing the red coloration, the oxidation taking place by the fire. Pretty immature still, this is still pretty clayey. It's not hard at all, you can actually break it with your hands if you're strong enough. For scale, this rock is probably about 6 centimeters to scale. So in October 2003, now we got the report in June, and again in October, the hopes are that the fire would extinguish did not transpire. So the EMA, the Ministry of Energy, and I know the GST revisited the site. The EMA, on November the 4th, conducted some air quality tests, and also some tests on the water. Now, to me, the results are pretty startling, to me. The furthest point is about 9 points, 1, 2, 3. It's about 8 or 9 points, and the furthest point is no more than 400 meters away. And according to guidelines, sulfur dioxide emissions greater than 0.603 ppm, or 0.603, is considered hazardous. They were getting sulfur emissions as much as 6 on their scale. Now, to me, that's pretty startling. Not only to me, to everyone. So we started to panic. The health authorities were mobilized. Suddenly there were a flurry of meetings between the Ministry of Energy, NEMA. NEMA was consulted because we started to think evacuation mode. And no one likes to hear evacuation, so we had to keep that pretty low. We consulted the fire services now to get this fire out, this burning bed. And the GST was also consulted for technical advice. And of course we needed the machinery of the Ministry of Works to get the equipment in. In fact, they were the most eager actually. Here we are actually mobilizing the team. So again, the Ministry of Works provided the driver and the farmer. The bed was actually probably about 300 to 400 meters from the road.
More like half a mile.
Probably half a mile. It was quite a trek. So it was quite a task to get water into the site. Here, the farmer actually, somebody had to go with a brush and cutlass, cut the land, and get the farmer in. Here we see representatives from the fire services, the EMA, and again the Ministry of Works. This was on November 27, 2003, by the way. Again, another snapshot of the forces being mobilized. Here the fire services is coming in action. They're actually carrying a hand pump there to the site. Some of the meetings that we discussed, some of the meetings that we held, one of the concerns we had was how do we put out this fire? The easiest thing to say would be water, but even initially I said that moisture actually adds to the fire. So you can wet this bed, leave the site, and perpetuate the fire even more, because it's going to absorb the oxygen from the water. So that was an issue. We did a bit of research, we looked at the website, we got a few books, and looked at how it's done in other areas of the world. The Powder River Basin in Wyoming. This is a critical problem for them, because they have coal mining issues. And there was a variety of measures recommended. Foaming, water was not one of the best recommended options because of the danger of steam explosions. So besides the perpetuation of the fire, after you wet the bed, you had the possibility of steam explosions. Now, having said that, the coal beds that I'm talking about in the US is 30 feet thick coal beds, not necessarily the 7 foot that I'm looking at. And this was a sad day for me because here I was actually looking at the process taking place. And here they are actually what I call the death of a laboratory. Because here I was actually observing the porcelainite forming at different stages. And here the firemen came and wiped it all away, washed it all away. I was amused though. This guy is actually wearing a dust mask. I was amused that, apologies to anybody in the fire services, but he was amused, I was amused. Here's a gas that's causing extensive wheezing and coughing, and they have a dust mask. Anyway, as I said, this to me was the end of a laboratory. Here I was observing the process taking place, observing the different stages of porcelainites, and here they took it away. I'm not living there, so I can afford to say that. This is about the weekend after they extinguished the blaze. They went in with an excavator and dug out the site. Here is the remnants of the lignite bed. Again, it's about 7 feet thick, so the top of it lies somewhere just about here. I think this galvanized is about 3 feet. If you can remember the previous slide, it looks nothing like it was before. All of these on the side are pieces of lignite bed that was dug out. This was to ensure that the fire doesn't reactivate itself or rekindle. What's the outcome? Had that bed continued to burn, who knows? Certainly we were going to get porcelainite deposit. Probably not as thick as this one shown at Point Rouge, but this is where we were heading. The question was asked, how long will this fire burn? The Chatham incident lasted for about 6 months. Speaking to residents in the Chatham, Highwell, Fishing Pond area, they were very proud of reporting burn periods of 7 years plus. That's a long time. Obviously more isolated areas. And then when you look into the literature, one example of 22 years reported, again in Powder River Basin in Wyoming. That's a long time. You can imagine, to form this thickness of deposit, this is about 20 feet cross section we're looking at here. You can imagine the period of burn that we're thinking about when we're looking at. So just to emphasize, these beds do burn for very long periods, and as I said, there's 177 feet of bed that was waiting there at Chatham. All right, getting a bit more into the character of the rock, composition of the rock. Again, this was done from research, a bit of research. Unfortunately, I didn't have the facilities to do this myself. Thanks to those who did it before. Generally, looking at predominantly silicon oxide, comprised about 60% of the rock, the blue shading, silicon oxide. Aluminum oxide, probably in the vicinity of 25% of the rock. Some amount of iron oxide, generally responsible for the color that we're seeing in these rocks. And some amount of sulfate and moisture. How do these chemicals express themselves in the mineralogy? In terms of mineralogy, we're looking at quartz, by far the most abundant, 30% of the rock. We're looking at indeterminate, in other words, it's so fine and it's so burnt, it's like glass. It's discernible using, this is by petrography, so it's indeterminable, it's not determinable, it's indeterminable, sorry. Halloysite, which is a clay mineral. Alunite, geothite and hematite, this is where the iron oxides go. And finally, very high temperature silicates, crystobalite and malite, a very small fraction of this rock. This is typically what we expect to see. And this is, I assume from what I've seen that this sort of composition is going to be present in a rock like this. Now we're not looking at the bright red, really burnt rock as yet. According to the description by Bristow, typical would be red, compact, massive, baked clay, composed largely of an amorphous material. Unaltered quartz, halloysite clay, minor with variable amounts of alunite, a sulfate mineral. small amounts of high temperature silicates may also be present in this sample. If we continue to burn, this is what we will get. We get a lesser amount of alunite, and at the same time, our high temperature silicates would increase. So here we have a much larger percentage of cristobalite and mullite, very high temperature silicates. Again, a very large portion of glassy fragments, indeterminable. So just to recap a bit on the process that we just went through. We have, this is the protolith or the original rock. It's just a grey mudstone. This was actually taken at Chatham, this picture. We have combustion of the lignite bed by spontaneous combustion or by lightning or bushfires. The Chatham example was actually caused by a bushfire. This burn continues up to what temperature? The presence of alunite, the aluminous mineral, the sulphate mineral, sorry, is stable in temperatures below 700 degrees Celsius. So with the presence of alunite in the rock, we can assume that our temperatures were no greater than 700 degrees Celsius. The puzzling thing is where we have high temperature silicates, the cristobalite, mullite, tridymite, very high temperature silicates, normally found in proximity to volcanic rocks. In fact, normally found in volcanic rocks. Here we are talking about the temperatures in excess of 1000 degrees Celsius, typically 1200 degrees Celsius. So the association of these two rocks is a bit puzzling. But certainly the inference is that we do have very high temperatures leading to the formation of these rocks. Again, in pictures, just recapping, the mudstone, we burn, we continue to burn to very high temperatures. We begin, all these pictures came from Chatham. We begin the formation of porcelainite rocks. And the day after they excavated, these pictures were taken. This is actually, this grey mudstone transformed into porcelainite rocks. Once these rocks are transformed, they go through a process of weathering and alteration. So a walk on the coast today, what we would see is not the hard compact rock that we see at Cedars Point, but a more weathered version, typically a more weathered version. These are actually the clays above the porcelainite showing the red staining. Hydrothermal alteration, the movement of fluids through the rock, causing some sort of discoloration. What is the deposition environment associated with porcelainite rocks? As I said before, you read in the literature that it's probably associated with coal, probably associated with lignites. So I took a few days out in the field to find out if that is so. I have descriptive sections around 5 porcelainite outcrops, all right, which prove that it is a fluvial deltaplane environment, lagunal, tenacious, tidal facies. 4 of these outcrops originate in the southwest peninsula. One of these outcrops actually is the porcelainite bed here at Point Paloma. This is zoom in at the southwest peninsula outcrop, Cedars Point, Punta del Morro, Point Rouge, and Point Cliff. We had on the tongue there, Point Cliff. And the Point Paloma outcrop along Matura Bay. Last year, the 12th of July last year, a year from today, some of you would have participated in a field trip on the East Coast, on the Aryan Coast, sorry, which I led, starting at Puerto Grande all the way to Keon Cliff. This is the transect from that field trip. A variety from tidal dominated deposits into fluvial dominated deposits. This is actually the picture view of the cliff section. This is the porcelainite bed at this point. This porcelainite bed corresponds with this porcelainite bed here on the map, which corresponds with the point right here on the photo. What I will do is take you through a slight transect while we walk through the deposition environment associated with the porcelainite deposits. At this point, dominantly we had intertidal to subtidal sediments, flazer, lenticular bedding, very characteristic of tidal signatures. bidirectional ripples, lenticular sands. Again, very characteristic of tidal deposits. Bidirectional crossbeds. Again, another signature. Scilithos ichnofacies. Scilithos ichnofacies, trace fossils, very indicative of nearshore environments. So we're not yet into fluvial. We're still a bit way off from the porcelain bed, probably a bit deeper into the depositional environment. As we move up the section, we get into these nice, very well-defined porcelain upward sequences, indicative of a deeper, I interpret it as a more deeper environment. So there's a deepening in the basin. These nice porcelain upward sequences. 3 were mapped. I must say that these are these are descriptive sections and not measured sections. And then as we get to the porcelain outcrop at Coin Cliff, we get into a fluvial dominated delta plain. This is where we expect to get lignite beds. And as expected, here is a lignite bed. This bed is actually 10 feet thick. My apologies for scale, 10 feet. This porcelain bed is probably 24 feet in scale. So we're looking at a channel system, fluvial channel system here, in the vicinity of 30 and 40 feet. This channel is pictured here, where we have the sands of the channel axis and the channel margin. And here in picture again is the lignite bed. So from Keon Cliff, certainly we are getting into a lignite environment. Moving to the north of the Southwest Peninsula, starting from Cedros Point, straight up to Point Rouge. So covering the next 3 porcelain deposits, Cedros Point, Punta del Morro, and Point Rouge. Starting off at Cedros Point, porcelain deposit 25 feet thick, unfortunately not much outcrop. But the little outcrop that there is a lignite bed, probably about 3 feet thick if I can recall. So it's mainly lignite beds, carbonaceous mudstones, as pictured here. Moving further towards the east, along the transect, again very limited outcrops, but we come across dominantly muddy facies, porcelain upward sequences. I interpreted those to be delta front facies. And then getting to the Punta del Morro outcrop, where we actually have the porcelainites, we're getting again similar to what we saw at Coin Cliff, large channels, fluvial facies. Alright, so again we're very shallow. In fact, if you walk along the beach at these points, basically what you see on the beach today represents how these rocks were deposited how many thousands of years ago. Very characteristic fluvial channel facies, slumped blocks at the base of these channels, mud, river class, planar and trough cross beds, laminated, thinly bedded laminated alternation between sandstone and shale. So we are, according to the theory, according to literature, we are into a delta plain environment where we'd expect the deposition of lignite beds. For the final outcrop, a walk along this section, you pretty much walk along strike. In other words, you walk along the depositional dip of the beds, the depositional strike of the beds. I'm just going to follow you quickly through a cross section in this area and end at the Point Rouge outcrop. Characteristically, what we saw, mudstone deposits, borrowed parallel laminated mudstone deposits, some silty deposits, discontinuous sands, very thin channel sands, some more massive channel sands. Again, for scale, and I must apologize, this section is about 20 feet. So we're looking at no more than 30 feet thickness of the cliffs in that area. Here, this section is actually hung. This line is actually hung on a mudstone layer which comprises lots of wood fragments, as pictured here. So this section is hung on that layer. Moving further to the east, you come across a lignite bed, as seen here. What I interpret as delta plain deposits, thinly bedded mudstones and shales, as pictured here. And very distinctive, a leaf imprint. This was found at the base of one of the beds. You're walking through a lagoon, you're walking in a shallow marine environment, you would expect to see roots, leaves, again, I concluded that again I'm looking at a delta plane environment. We're looking at a lagoon overlain by overbank deposits, incised by a channel. There were very subtle erosional features, and hence this erosional interpretation at this point. And if I walk further to the east, we come upon the Point Rouge porcelainite outcrop. So again, we're saying we have these outcrops, they are associated with lignites. Let's move further to the north, Point Paloma. Do we expect to see the same? I did. This again is another section. We're looking at, I would estimate, 700 to 800 feet of section in this transect. Looking at this point, what's characteristic are these lignite beds. Again, 1, 2, 3 lignite beds. And this fluvial was interpreted as a fluvial channel. Here, the base of the channel is pictured. Very distinctive erosional base. And here, I'm actually standing on one of the lignite beds. This is now overlain, as we saw in the Aryan section, by a tidal signature. These are lenticular bedded and anastomosing shades, very characteristic of tidal environments. So just as we saw in Aryan, tidal overlain by fluvial. Here I'm seeing it at the Point Paloma area. Getting to the porcelainite outcrop, to the top of the section, the lignite beds continue. Very thin look, thin lignite beds, overlain by a 40 to 60 foot section of porcelainite as pictured here. So again, just as we expected, just as I've seen in the other outcrops, this environment is associated with lignites. So we are looking at the upper delta plane and lagoonal deposits. There's also a strong tidal signature. Alright, so I concluded deposition environments in close proximity of lignite beds to all outcrops support the present theories on the formation of these rocks. What about the age of the porcelainites? And John, we had some discussion on this. Aging the porcelainite deposit. When does this process take place? Going back to Key and Cliff section, this is the porcelainite bed at Key and Cliff. And above the section, there's a large interval of no outcrop. And then you get this channel, this fluvial channel, very distinctive fluvial channel. In this fluvial channel, probably represents about 300 feet missing section. What you actually get are the porcelainite pebbles. You get halloysite clay, and you get lignite fragments. So what it's telling me is that very shortly after the deposition of these rocks, and you had the process taking place, the porcelainites being formed. This marks the boundary between the Monlifer and the Aryan Formation. So in terms of age, geological age, we're looking at late Pliocene, very early Pleistocene in formation. And as we know from the Chatham incident, this continues still today. What's the significance of the porcelainites? Because of the association with lignite rocks, I think it's safe to conclude that it is indicative of some sort of a paleo coastline which existed at the time of deposition of these rocks. So certainly there should be some correlative value in the location of these porcelainite rocks. In other parts of the world, the porcelainite rocks are used as an indicator of where you have coal resources. The uses of the porcelainite rocks. The Native American Indians use them as weapons and tools. Commonly here in Trinidad, we use it as road slag, especially in the Southwest Peninsula. Some of us would know the term red road, especially if you grew up around the oil field areas. A lot of the research that went into porcelainite rocks actually originated because of a need to find a rock with pozzolanic properties for use in cement manufacture. When I say pozzolanic properties, I mean that you're looking for a rock rich in aluminum that you can mix with lime. And that forms the binding property of cements. So back in the 1960s, 1970s, the large amount of porcelain outcrops that existed on the Southwest Peninsula was seen as a potential for, 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 um, for this rock type. A lot of tests were carried out by numerous companies, Halliburton, Geological Society in England. And what they found, what all these tests found, was that yes, the porcelain rock has very good pozzolanic properties, but because of the wide and variable sulfur content, they weren't able to use it. Again, the uses of porcelainite, two pictures from Cedrus and from the Road in Palo Seco. Here we see the red road, as I described. I used to catch marbles on this actually as a boy years ago. And here, this is what they plan to use for the road building in Cedrus. Just to conclude, some concluding statements. I think this is a very distinctive rock. It's formed by a localized contact metamorphic process. And we are looking at temperatures probably as much as 1200 degrees Celsius, suggested by the rock type, the minerals. The conformal contacts with enveloping shales suggest that interbedded lignite beds contributed more to the process than beds at the roof or floor. What I'm saying there is, you're seeing conformal contacts. So lignite beds have not been burned from these areas. So I am left to conclude that the burning process, the porcelainites that were formed because of burning lignite within these beds, and not at the top or the base. Still, even with the burning process of lignite, you expect some amount of missing section. Lignite is going to burn, it's going to disappear, it's going to leave some sort of a collapsed structure. Where are these? Are we seeing these? On some outcrops you do actually. And again, I concluded from the fieldwork that outcrops are associated with shallow water to delta plain environments. And yet some questions remain. Lignite depths of 100 feet reported drilled in one well. That's a bit puzzling to me. How do you get oxygen to those depths to perpetuate the burn? Actually, there were experiments in Wyoming where they actually tried to simulate a lignite burn. And what they did is they pumped oxygen through fissures to see how long and how extensive the burn would be. It didn't last. 2 or 3 days and the lignites went out. So it's a bit puzzling. Missing lignite section, where are the structures? We are seeing a few, but for the thicknesses that we are talking about, 80 feet, where is the missing lignite? And again, the other puzzle that I alluded to, the coexistence of high temperature silicates with alunite. What is the temperature that we are looking at? And with that, I thank you for your attention, for bearing with me for the past 45 minutes. And I welcome any questions.
I have a question since no one asked. I remember seeing on the news that the residents were complaining that they had reported this thing a long time and nobody was taking it on. Is that really true? From your account, the account you were investigating, but they were saying that
I think that was true. A couple of my visits were personal. I went to look at the porcelain being formed. But after the initial visits in July, there was a long period of inactivity. The general feeling was the hope that it would burn itself out, and with the rainy season, it would eventually die. It was only when the residents put the incident in the papers, in the media, that I actually saw frantic activity taking place. So there's some of the proof to that. We need to get anybody to move this. Before they report.
You could give us some of the semi-metamorphic, so you altered in the heat.
Maybe low grade.
Photographs you showed, you spoke about the fact that the sedimentary structures are preserved, and you saw some part of the slides and showed the bedding and everything preserved without any evidence of with the burning outcrop, you actually seeing the thing crumbling and falling down. I assume that they were not in places, obviously, so it was crumbling and falling off, quite different from the ones that you showed where the actual bedding was preserved. So could you tell us a little bit more about that? That's one question. And then, did you look at anything regarding the sulphur? Did you look at that to see whether that also is a necessary element in the burning of the clips? The sulphur.
Yes, if I can answer your second question first. Sulfur is a residue. They say it's because of the presence of pyrite associated with the lignites, and you have the sulfur being precipitated after. I didn't look at it any further. Certainly the sulfur dioxide is emanating from
Everywhere that we see sulphur.
my experience is walking on the coast. Anytime you see a lignite bed, you see yellow staining from the sulfur. Here it became a bit exaggerated because of the acid precipitation. But certainly anywhere you see a lignite bed, in fact sometimes it's the only distinctive criteria between some of the lignite beds and the mudstones and surrounding mudstones, even for the yellow staining. So certainly it's present.
Matches something else on that.
Yes. And to answer your first question, I think that's a puzzle. And hence the debate with where were these lignite beds present that caused these considerable thicknesses. When you walk along a local outcrop, and if you measure different strikes, I haven't done that. In fact, I think that's further studies. If you measure different strike along these outcrops, what you get is a wavy sort of appearance. So you're seeing the bedding planes preserved, but you get local variations in the. So that's one indication to me that something's missing. Now, you have to compare it with the surrounding rocks. So the surrounding rocks maintain the bedding planes pretty even. Then you get to the porcelain, you see the wavy appearance. Something is missing. Secondly, you come across a lot of what they call collapsed breccia. I didn't show a slide with that, but these rocks are typically very angular. Angular because of stress and strain, they fracture and they fall apart. Normally where you see collapsed breccia, according to some of the literature that I've read, is because of something has been removed from below it. I haven't seen many examples of collapsed breccia. I've seen many examples of angular rocks, but I haven't seen many examples of collapsed breccia. Hence, my feeling is that a lot of the porcelain we see are coming from, you're not looking at 30 feet thick lignite beds. You're looking at about thinner beds, probably the 7 feet example that we've seen. A lot of those beds being good. The other puzzle to me is how do you have other lignite beds being preserved when you have 30 feet away at Cedar's Point, there's a 3-foot lignite bed being preserved. And you're talking about temperatures. To produce a deposit at Cedar's Point, you're looking at temperatures in excess of 1,000 degrees Celsius. And how do you have lignite beds being preserved above the deposit? So it's a bit puzzling.
Did you look at the Guanazari's quarry at all? I don't know how much of it's left there.
I did.
In there you can actually see molten slag on large joints within the porcelainite. And so that gives you an idea of the temperature that can be reached with it. But part of that, the outcrop there, does look collapsed. Okay. Much, particularly where you get these hot, not molten areas.
That's probably what some of the literature.
I just don't know what's there. But Hinter, you've been there.
That's the
White by the road.
White Man's Quarry.
On the east of the road.
Yeah, on the northern side of the road. And this is also an outcrop where you have a fantastically high percentage of organic material. They have a lot of leaf print
within the porcelainite.
Yeah. And the variation in color is tremendous because a lot of porcelain out there is actually tends to be fairly black.
Yes, black to purple.
Every variation.
Yes, I actually visited the site and unfortunately vegetation.
Yeah, but John, it may very well be that they have abandoned that.
Well, that's it. Probably nothing else. If you want to see some, if you go to the family day and go up to, the Wildfowl Trust in point of here, outside the main building there is a porcelainite block, and if you look at that carefully, you can see where there's molten
In place,
slag
that has
like
been put there.
No, it was taken from somewhere
Oh,
down
oh,
there. It was donated by someone.
Yes, related to one of your outcrops, you mentioned some of these leaf imprints. Is that widely distributed amongst all your location studies? Yes, it is.
No.
No.
Out of all the locations that I've seen leaves on only two spots.
Okay.
There at Punta del Moro and at Keon Cliff. They planted big patches of leaves in the porcelains.
Yes.
Actually, Mahindra at Union Industrial Estate, there's a porcelainite outcrop that has a lot of leaves in it.
Okay.
The one that where the pine plantation used to be.
Where is
Vesigny, the old Vesigny field.
Basically, this may be a question related to the work we did, but maybe for the benefit of students here. What are your thoughts on the trend of the lignites in terms of paleogeography of the basin, in terms of shoreline? The lignites extend for a fair distance across that southwestern peninsula. Maybe give me thought, in terms of direction.
Yes, certainly. Yes, certainly. This is what you're referring to.
Right.
Certainly, I think it is indicative of some sort of it has created value. It's some sort of a trend that favored lignite deposition at the time of deposition of the upper Monafa into the lower area. Certainly, I agree with you. It is indicative of some sort of a trend paleo coastline that existed at that time. It should help. It should mean that for a student, for exercises, you would want to run a transect probably just to the east of these deposits and probably inland. Inland exposures are very poor. So you may be limited to the sort of strike section of the coast. That's the disadvantage of it. The exposures for students are very limited. So yes, it does have a bigger trend to it.
One question. I remember when I was down at Erin, I think it was a few field trip, we found the whole leaves. How is it that those high temperatures of 1000 degrees Celsius, 700 degrees Celsius, those leaves got preserved still, and those high temperatures?
I'm going to add that to my puzzle actually.
Then is it metamorphic or sediment?
Metamorphic, quite big.
Yeah, basic, I know.
Changing in mineralogy.
Then yeah, this has
funny,
such a has to be very low grade.
The stack of leaves
No,
that was
you
found
remember
at
melting
the
the rock.
it's actually a stack
Recrystallization.
of what I think it's leaves. I actually broke off a piece and took a picture. So I think it's the actual leaf.
It's actually, I remember it was not short.
To say, yes, I guess. I remember breaking out a piece and it was very friable. I felt it fell apart in my hands. So it's a very good question, you know.
Yeah, but may not be 1000 degrees Celsius.
Snow burning.
That's it. It may not be. I don't think it's a little bit.
A comment on your 100 foot down lignite, porcelainite deposit. It might be, well, that might have been at surface at some point, and it's probably an indication of the recent history, tectonic history of the basin,
Yeah.
which we need to pay attention to. It could have been at surface at the time of formation, and now it's not at 100 feet. That's one thing. And the other thing is, when drilling a well, we build a red road. So
Contamination in the cellar.
if not could be contaminated.
Yeah, if you look at old wells, you see a lot of porcelainite mentioned in cuttings.
Yeah.
Contaminated mud.
Well, the other thing is, how deep do you, what sort of pressure and depth do you need to form lignite?
Well, I guess it's not pressure dependent. It's just of oxygen. Once you get oxygen down there,
No, the original lignite. To convert your organic matter into lignite. Does this involve a certain depth or not? Because you can't start burning it until it is lignite.
yes. Yes. you're right, you're right.
So does this mean that we have to have mechanism to bring the lignite back to surface?
Does it have to be like,
What,
he showed
to
some
burn?
woody fragments, he showed some woody fragments.
So
Does
it's
it have to
like,
be
yeah.
like that?
that's what it's
Or
like,
can it be
it's
just
large
some wood?
preserved wood fragments. That's what
Ah,
we're doing in
lignite.
Chatham. Wood fragments.
Yeah, but was it lignitized wood or wood?
Lignitized wood.
That's a good point, really.
It might be some wood.
Not wood.
That's a good point, because the example that I showed, certainly the porcelain pebbles that was shown at the base of this channel.
Actually, Hazley, too, in Union Industrial Estate, you also see porcelainite fragments at the bases of channels within the upper Monlotha.
So when the process is occurring, has been occurring.
Has that been occurring elsewhere? Of course, those outcrops probably don't exist again.
But he showed it in one of those channels.
Yeah, that's at
A lot of
Pond
things
Cliff,
are happening at that time.
but it's very distinct in Union Industrial Estate. The hill to the furthest north, at least what was the hill behind the Tobago Dam. What was the Tobago Dam?
It would be quite a bit older.
I took some photos of it before it disappeared.
They would be older than these, the same as the...
Yeah, this would, the Union Estate is older.
South of Pitch Lake.
That's Upper Monlotha.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Is the, on what side of that Chatham Road was that stuff that you reported on? Good.
On the side, on the southern side.
On the southern side?
The main road, not
And
the main road, not Chatham Road itself.
not Chatham Road.
No, on the main road.
If you go along the Chatham Road towards the beach, along the Chatham Road towards
You
the
see a lot of old quarries.
the very last turn off is a trap on the right hand side, which is going southwest in other words. You go through the initial part of, where you have vegetation, and I don't know if you know what banga is, but you go through a number of banga trees, and eventually there is no vegetation whatsoever. And the last time I was there, I recorded temperatures digging to the surface of about 6-8 inches, up to 78 degrees Celsius on the surface, no vegetation. So when you say up to 1,000 degrees for the burning process here, I'm happy that you said up to, it can be much lower.
It can be much lower.
Alright? But there was no vegetation on the surface. But what we found was